the time has come for our first Nintendo Direct of 2025. A bit of a later start on the Direct calendar this year, and mainly because of Nintendo being hard at work behind the scenes prepping for Switch 2. But hey, better late than never, and this Direct is expected to be the biggest and best one of all time for the big N. So with that said, here's a few titles on both the Nintendo side as well as the third-party side that I believe will be shown off in one way or another during the show. First off, new Mario Kart! Okay, well, it's obvious that this is going to be here, likely as the show's leadoff hitter. How confident do I feel about this? Well, consider the fact that when the Switch 2 was first revealed in a 2-minute video just a couple of months ago, about 2.5 months ago, as the time that you're going to be seeing this, we got a tease of a brand new Mario Kart title. While that tease was very brief, about 10 seconds or so, it was still enough of a tease to convince me that this will be the launch title for the console. As for what this game will officially be called, well, that is anybody's guess. Could be Mario Kart 9, it could be Mario Kart X, whatever. We'll just call it Mario Kart 9 for now until we find out otherwise. It is safe to assume, however, that this will certainly be in the show. In terms of release timing, well, obviously that's going to depend on when the system launches. I will go for release timing of mid-May for this one. Next up, we have a brand new 3D Mario, and it's another safe assumption that this will be in here as well. The last brand new 3D Mario release that we got was Super Mario Odyssey, way back in October 2017 during the first year of Switch 1. Now don't get me wrong, Odyssey is a terrific game. However, the time has definitely come for something new. As of right now, we don't know what the new Mario game is called or what it will look like, but that is likely to change come April 2nd, which, of course, as I mentioned, as the time you're seeing this, will be tomorrow. Release timing will probably be similar to that of Mario Odyssey, which means it'll more than likely be Nintendo's big holiday game for this year. As for exact timing, my guess would be a late October or early November release for this one. Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. Well, if you're a Metroid fan, then the painfully long wait that you've had to endure is almost at its end, and honestly, I kind of feel sorry for you. This game was first shown off in the summer of 2017, with the assumption being that the game would be out at some point in 2018. Well, the 2018 year came and went, and while some awesome games did release on Switch during that time frame, Metroid Prime 4 was nowhere to be seen. Then, during a direct that aired in early 2019, it was revealed that development wasn't going as well as Nintendo would have liked. As such, the entire game was cancelled and development basically started all over again from scratch. While we will never get to fully see what the original version of the game would have looked like, what we do know about it is that it is due out at some point this year, because as of right now, we have a very vague 2025 release window. That some point will likely be in the form of a Switch 2 launch title, but at the same time, it will also probably be released on Switch 1 as well, due to the fact that when the game was first announced, it was advertised as being for Switch 1. Therefore, Nintendo needs to fulfill that obligation by releasing the game on Switch as promised, as this would be a huge benefit for those who won't be able to purchase the Switch 2 right away at launch for one reason or another, whether it be not wanting to upgrade right away or not having the necessary funds to be able to purchase the system immediately. As far as actual release timing goes for this game, that will obviously depend on when the new system launches, but for now, I'll place it for around mid-May, just like with Mario Kart. Star Fox. Okay, so this one is probably a bit of a long shot, but I think it's safe to agree that the entire fan base of this franchise would completely lose their minds if this somehow appears in the show. We're definitely due for a new entry in this series, as it has not received an entry since 2016. It's been 9 years at this point, but is Nintendo even ready to revive this essentially dormant franchise anytime soon? Well, that remains to be seen. Is it possible that it shows up? Yes. Is it likely? Probably not. You never know, though. If it doesn't show up, it's not the end of the world, because there's plenty of active franchises already as is. If it does appear, though, then 2026 would be the earliest that I could see this coming out, assuming a new entry is ready, of course. Donkey Kong! Well, it's been quite a hot minute since we received a brand new entry in this franchise as well. While we did get two DK games on Switch, those were both ports of older games. One of those ports was Tropical Freeze, which came out in 2014 on Wii U, and in 2018 on Switch. Then there was the most recent Switch entry, which was a re-release of Donkey Kong Country Returns, a title that first released on Nintendo Wii all the way back in 2010. That's 15 years that we're going back here. Now, they're both good games, but again, they're both re-releases and therefore do not count. How Nintendo basically continues to ignore this franchise time after time is beyond me, because DK is one of the company's most iconic characters. So I think the time is definitely right for a new game featuring this beloved ape and his pal Diddy. When would it come out, though? Probably not until early 2026 at minimum, and that's only because of how crowded the schedule is for the remainder of this year. We'll see what happens, though. F-Zero. When was the last time we had a new release in this franchise? If you said 2023, well, you would technically be right. However, that release is an online-only 99 version for NSO subscribers, so that doesn't really count. The last time a mainline entry released, however, was in the early 2000s. Now, F-Zero X and F-Zero GP Legend were both solid games, so it baffles me that we haven't had a release of any kind in this franchise for a little over 2 decades now. Even a port or remaster of an older game for Switch would have been fine, but they couldn't even bother to do that. I'd say that we are certainly due for a new entry here. In fact, we're more overdue for F-Zero than we are for Star Fox and DK. This series is very good and the premise for it is solid, but I just wish Nintendo would do more with this. Personally, I'd love to see a new game in this series, as would the die-hard fans of this series. The original title on SNES as well as the N64 version were really good games too. It's such a shame that Nintendo stopped this series. As for why they stopped, well, we'll probably never know. I'd love to see this come back, but that's sadly looking unlikely. If we somehow get surprised with a new entry, 2026 is where I'm slotting it. Animal Crossing. Well, Animal Crossing is definitely another franchise that is among the popular ones for Nintendo's fans. And as of recording date for this video, it's now been exactly 5 years since Animal Crossing New Horizons released. And at the time, it was a game that the world pretty much needed because, COVID had started, everything was pretty much locked down left, right, and center, and nobody had anything to do. Like, you couldn't go out anywhere, you couldn't see people, you could only interact, online pretty much. And the only people you could see in person were, like close friends or family members if they lived near you. So, really, Animal Crossing New Horizons was basically the perfect game that came at the perfect time. And it's highly likely that we're going to see a brand new Animal Crossing game on the Switch too. As for when it's going to come out, well, probably not right at launch, because, obviously don't get me wrong, it would probably sell a lot of copies, but I don't think, and I'm pretty sure that the team has been hard at work on a new Animal Crossing game for Switch too, but I don't think it's going to be quite ready to go right at launch. I do, however, still see this being an early Switch 2 title, so we'll put it for 2026 at a still to be determined time. New IP. Well, I suppose it wouldn't be too unrealistic for this to happen, as previous history shows that a new franchise has generally been introduced with each new Nintendo generation. Examples of this include F-Zero, Pilot Wings, and Star Fox being introduced during the Super Nintendo era, Mario Party debuting during the Nintendo 64 generation, and Luigi's Mansion being the launch title for the Nintendo GameCube. A more recent example, however, was the introduction of ARMS during the Switch 1 launch period. So, I would say that the chances of a new franchise coming out for the Switch 2 debut are pretty good. As for what type of new franchise we could possibly get from this, well, that remains to be seen. However, there is one strong hunch I do have that leads to the likelihood of this happening, and it goes back to last fall when certain people were chosen for a playtest program. I don't know any of the details of what happened in that playtest because I didn't get to take part, but I wouldn't even be allowed to share any of the information anyway due to the strict non-disclosure agreements that Nintendo had. So, while we probably won't get to know any of the details about the playtest right now, the possibility of this being discussed in the Direct is out there. Now, another thing about new IPs for Nintendo is that they are generally used as launch titles for the system, as outlined in the ARMS example. So there's a strong chance that whatever this ends up becoming could become a Switch 2 launch title. Of course, we won't know for sure until the Direct airs, so we'll have to stay tuned and see what happens. NSO! It's been a few years since we had a new addition to the NSO console library, with the most recent additions being Game Boy and Game Boy Advance in early 2023. So in my mind, the time is certainly right for a new console to be added to the service, with the most likely candidate this time around being the GameCube. While that system didn't have strong sales numbers, it did give us great titles such as Mario Kart Double Dash, Super Mario Sunshine, Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, and more. Now, imagine being able to replay those on Switch with online support, especially when it comes to titles such as Smash Melee, all of the GameCube Mario Party titles, and the aforementioned Double Dash. Not to mention that a lot more options would open up for weekend gamers here on the channel. The timing is certainly right in my opinion, and should Nintendo agree, I think this will likely be available at launch. Okay, we have all the major Nintendo published stuff out of the way, so now let's go over some of the third-party franchises that I believe will make an appearance. Starting with Split Fiction. This title just came out not too long ago and has already sold very well. While the current Switch likely wouldn't be strong enough to run this, it could very well be a Switch 2 launch title. What makes this theory more likely is that the game is made by EA, a company that has supported Nintendo systems in the past. While they've shown remarkable support for some Switch 1 titles, they haven't exactly been consistent with support on another certain genre of games, but we'll get to that a little bit later. EA players have been eating pretty good on Switch 1, so I would expect that to continue on Switch 2. I can see this as a strong candidate to be a launch title for the console, and one that I would certainly consider buying, if not for the unfortunate downside of requiring another person to play with you. Still a fantastic game overall, though. Kingdom Hearts 4. 6 years have passed since the release of Kingdom Hearts 3 in 2019. This newest installment was formally announced in 2022, but there's been no news of any kind since then, not even a release date. Then again, I suppose no news is good news these days, but also, Kingdom Hearts games have a bit of a history when it comes to release delays. As an example, Kingdom Hearts 3 was originally supposed to be due out in 2018 before it got moved to 2019. As far as this new title goes, it's literally impossible to say when this might come out, since no information other than the fact that it exists is currently available. As of right now, the rumors surrounding this game's release list it as a 2026 title, so that's where it goes for now. Emphasis on for now, because it could very well end up being delayed beyond that, but we'll just have to see what Square Enix says, assuming they choose to say anything at all about the game during the show. Sonic Racing Crossworlds. While the first two Sonic Racing games were somewhat decent, none of them have been a super serious challenger to Mario Kart. This game, however, has the potential to be a serious threat to that series. This game was first revealed at last year's Game Awards and is currently in the development process. I even had the privilege of taking part in the recent beta test that Sega had for this game, and it was quite an experience. Obviously, there are still things that need to be changed for the full release, but as it stands right now, it is a fantastic game. No release date has been announced as of yet. However, recent Sonic titles have released during the holiday season, so I would expect this to follow suit and also be a holiday title. Like with Metroid, this will likely be a cross-gen title with versions for both Switch 1 and Switch 2. Monster Hunter Wilds. The newest entry in this long-running series has been one of 2025's most highly anticipated games, and so far it has lived up to the hype. I can see this as a strong Game of the Year contender come award time at the end of the year. Capcom is another company that has always been a Nintendo supporter, having provided plenty of offerings on Switch 1. That support is likely to continue once the new system rolls around. The previous Monster Hunter game did pretty well on Switch, and having this new entry on the system would result in a lot of new sales. We won't see this on regular Switch due to the hardware being too old, but I can definitely see this being here for Switch 2. I expect this to be available right out of the jump on Switch 2, but if it's not quite ready by then it would probably be a month or two after launch before we get to see this on the system. Looks like I scrolled up here. Okay. Nonetheless, I do think a Switch 2 release for this title is in the cards before the end of this year. Madden series. The last time any Madden game made an appearance on a Nintendo system was Madden 13. That was all the way back in 2012 on the Nintendo Wii U. Since then, Nintendo fans have gotten the cold shoulder with this series, although part of that probably had to do with the financial disaster that the Wii U was. Now, 13 years later, we're coming off a console generation that has been Nintendo's best-selling. We're coming off a console that has been Nintendo's best-selling system ever. There's absolutely no reason for EA to ignore the most popular system of all time in this genre, with the exception of another sports series that we'll get to in just a bit. Yet in this company's eyes, the console doesn't exist to them in this department. I can understand that thinking in 2017, but we're in 2025 now. Time to get up the program here. Will EA be kinder to Switch 2 with sports than they were with Switch 1? Given how this generation went, probably not. I could very well be proven wrong, though, and if Madden does show up here, the first Switch 2 entry for it would likely be Madden 26 as a May or June release. Would be far too late for a Nintendo version of Madden 25. Fingers crossed, football fans. NHL 25. The last time we saw an NHL game release on a Nintendo console was NHL Slapshot in 2010 for the Wii. Prior to that, the last mainline NHL to come out for a Nintendo system was NHL 06 on the Nintendo GameCube way back in 2005. Hockey is my number one favorite sport, and that's not just my Canadian roots talking here. It's my number one favorite sport, period. EA really needs to up their game here and provide a solid hockey experience to Nintendo people. At the moment, it can only be played by PlayStation and Xbox users. EA has catered to Nintendo's audience before, however, with hockey, so I think they should do so again here. Summer likely wouldn't be the most ideal time to put out a hockey game on a new Nintendo console, however, which means we'd likely be waiting until about early October before NHL 26 shows up on the console, assuming it does so at all. It probably won't, though, because EA hates the Nintendo fan base right now with sports. I really hope it does show up, though, but even if it doesn't, I at least have my PlayStation 5 as a backup option. MLB The Show. This one should be a no-brainer. When this series first launched years ago under a different name, the only way to play it was if you owned a PlayStation. But in 2020, things began to change a bit because Sony was essentially given an official order for Major League Baseball to allow the series to go multi-platform, or else the MLB license would be revoked from them. Because of this, the series expanded to Xbox in 2021, and then further expanded to Nintendo Switch in 2022. I've played the Switch version of the series for the last few years before going back to PlayStation for this year's game. Frankly, I'm surprised that this year's title even got a Switch release to begin with, and that's because when the 2025 version was announced at the end of January, San Diego Studios had said that the game would no longer be supported on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Now, that decision obviously makes sense, because both of those consoles came out in 2013, and over time, newer technology comes out that renders the older tech obsolete and no longer needed. Yet, despite that statement, they decided to release this on Nintendo Switch anyway. Now, you would think that this is a bit contradictory, and technically, it would be, because the Nintendo Switch came out in 2017, while the tech that's inside it, that helps it run, came out in 2015. However, another theory that's been floating through my head about this with MLB The Show, specifically, is that SDS more than likely has separate teams that work on the game each year. A main dedicated team for PlayStation and Xbox, and a secondary team for Nintendo. With all of this in mind, I'm about 99% sure that an enhanced version of this title for Switch 2 will likely come out as a launch game for the system. Further increasing my confidence level in this is that summer is prime baseball season, so it would be a perfect chance to get a Switch 2 version of this game. Let's hope I don't strike out with this one. NBA 2K. This is another no-brainer here, as this series has always been available on the Switch. While basketball may not be among my favorite sports, I do play this on occasion, and it's not too bad. The downside of Nintendo versions of this game, especially a couple of the more recent ones, is that it's missing features that you'd otherwise be able to find on both PlayStation and Xbox. And again, this has to do with the current age of the tech inside the Switch. But I feel that once this game appears on Switch 2, the tech will again be strong enough to reintroduce those missing features. But for now, Nintendo players will have to make do with what they have. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, of course, but I'm sure Nintendo users who do enjoy playing this series are going to want more, and they're about to get that very soon. Because of the timing of when Switch 2 is likely to release, it'll probably be too late in the current 2K cycle to make this available on launch date. It's still likely to come out on Switch 2, don't get me wrong about that, but you'll more likely have to wait until about early September before you'll be able to hit the core on an enhanced version. Unless, for whatever reason, the block gets thrown up, but that's highly unlikely. Finally, we circle back to EA for this last one, and that has to do with FC Sports. Now, you may think that this is a bit of a different soccer series from EA. Technically, it is a newer series, but at the same time, it also isn't. Because if you remember, this series, a soccer video game series, originally started as FIFA way back when. But because of licensing agreement changes, they pretty much had to change the name of the series as a whole, which means it's now known as FC, EAFC or something like that. And out of all the EA Sports games, this is the only one that has been made available on the Switch every single year. Now, granted, some of the later titles, some of the last few titles under the FIFA branding were released on the Switch as Legacy Editions, meaning just copy and paste with roster updates and no new features. But under the FC branding, the game has undergone significant upgrades. So, I guess that's good for soccer fans that play on the Nintendo Switch. Now, I don't think this will be available right out of the gate at launch because, let's face it, a May or June release for the console would be way too late for an enhanced version of FC 25. However, because the series has been always been available on Switch 1, it will most certainly be available on Switch 2 a couple months or so after launch. Probably in September, because that's when the FC games usually come out. Okay, we've just about covered all the major titles that I expect to see pop up. Obviously, there's going to be many more Switch 2 games than what I've talked about here, but it'll still be a fair bit before those specific ones are ready, hence why I didn't mention them in this video. But now comes the part where we narrow down two other key components for Switch 2. One of those components is the release date. Trying to guess a release window for new products is usually the hardest part of predicting. However, some recent announcements have been pointing at one certain time frame about a month and a half from now. One of those was the announcement of a brand new LEGO Mario Kart set. While sets like these have come and gone before, they usually come out on a weekend. For some reason that's highly unexplainable, the newest set that was announced is scheduled to come out on May 15th. This is relevant because that date lands on a Thursday. And as I just mentioned, the new LEGO sets typically come out on a Saturday or Sunday, instead of on a Thursday like what they're doing with the upcoming set. Additionally, on that same day, Nintendo is opening up a second main store in the US, this time in San Francisco. But wait people, there's more! The upcoming Doom game, Doom the Dark Ages, also comes out on May 15th. That's important to note because that's a Microsoft published game for Xbox, and those usually come out on a Tuesday, rather than on a Thursday, which is when the Nintendo releases occur. When you put all of these announcements together for that one certain date, that leads me to believe that May 15th will be the launch date for the new system. And this makes a ton of sense for the reasons that I've already gone over. Therefore, unless we hear something different than what I've been hearing, I'm picking May 15th for the launch date. We will know for sure tomorrow, of course, but I'm going with mid-May at the earliest and early June at the latest. And the second key component out of the two is pricing. While this one is also a bit hard to predict because of the constantly changing state of the economy, it's actually easier to narrow down due to several factors that could play a part in the price range. For one thing, back in 2017, the original Switch retailed for $300 in American money. And yes, even though we use Canadian dollars where I live, I'm still going to refer to the pricings in American money and make things easier. Now, fast forward 8 years to 2025, and retail shoots up by $90 once inflation is accounted for. The retail price, that is. It's obvious that this system isn't going to be cheap. It's definitely going to be more expensive than the first Switch was, but only slightly. My calculations have determined that $300 in 2017 would be equal to $390 right now in 2025. But of course, Nintendo likes those round numbers. Therefore, adding another $10 would bring us up to a total of $400. If I'm doing the math correctly here, then that would be a 33% increase for the Switch 1 price. Fun fact, all these years later, Switch 1 is still selling for the exact same price that it originally launched at, without a single drop in that entire span. So, considering everything that I just explained in this section of the video, I think $400 would be the ideal price that Nintendo will want to launch at. The one obstacle that could possibly drive up the price, however, is the current situation with tariffs, but I'm not going to dive into that because I'm not here to talk about politics. Anyway, I think $400 would be the logical price here. If, for whatever reason, they decide to launch it at $350, it would be a bit of a surprise because that's how much the Switch OLED currently goes for, but it would still be affordable at that particular price point. If they have to go up to $450, it wouldn't exactly be the best, but it wouldn't be terrible either. $450 would still be doable in my eyes. If they have to go up even further to $500, then you're starting to approach PlayStation 5 territory, and that price level would likely scare off potential buyers, so they'll want to avoid that at all costs. I'm locking in $400, final answer. And that will just about do it here. Hopefully some of these predictions will end up working out, but knowing my personal track record, I wouldn't bet on that. With everything I've gone over, though, there's a good chance that I'll be right on a few of these. I'd like to be right on all of them, but that's highly unrealistic. Anyway, enjoy the direct, and I will see you tomorrow with my reactions. Just bear in mind that that particular video is going to be coming out a bit later in the day than originally anticipated because I'm most likely going to have to be working while the direct airs, and obviously I don't want to be spoiled beforehand. And because of something else that I also have on Wednesdays after work, I likely won't be able to record said video until about the middle of the afternoon, which will likely mean we'll be airing it in the early evening hours. You will still see it though, so don't worry. Anyways, that is going to do it here, and I will see you tomorrow.